So we're in zone 8B right outside of Mobile, Alabama, and I'm excited to have you back to see what we've accomplished in 4 years' time. From the time that we covered this ground to today has been almost exactly 4 years. And last time you came to see the garden, it was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing. Some of my details were forgotten or inaccurate, so I've kind of looked up some photos in my phone to look and remind myself of what exactly we did when we started and along the way. So I'm hoping that this is going to help you, either give you some information on things to do or not to do if you're on a similar journey. And my goal has always been to produce the most nutrient-dense food that I can. The quantity didn't matter to me, but the quality mattered. And if it's nutrient-dense, then we shouldn't need as much in order to provide the nutrients that we need. So I wanted to accomplish this without commercial inputs, fertilizers, insecticides. And so this has been a project to see, can we do it? You read and hear that you can, but until you see it happen, it's all just speculation. So hopefully, if this is also your goal, this might give you a little bit of encouragement or maybe some guidance as well. Back 4 years ago, around June of 2018, this land was raw, baking, getting rained on. It had been cleared. We were building a house. We didn't live out here. It was just left to the elements, and it baked into a brick. It was horrible. When it was time to start the garden, a neighbor kindly came over and disked the area for us. And we disked in quite a bit of gypsum to try to break up some of that clay. Then immediately we covered the entire area with 10 big round bales of hay. And a neighbor came and helped us with his tractor to spread all that hay. So we had baked dead clay dirt that then we broke up, added gypsum, and covered. A few months later, we moved out to the property, and I brought with me some comfrey and some thornless blackberries and some sweet potato and some turmeric and a few other things. And most everything died in here. It was just awful. There was no life whatsoever. Luckily, 2 tiny little clumps of comfrey survived, and in the beginning, it was pretty sad. I brought with us a couple buckets of chicken run dirt from our previous property, and I put it in one row, and it was the only place that really grew anything that first year, and it really grew. We had cucumbers to share, and where I had the chicken run dirt, there was a difference. As time passed, we added more gypsum over the years. We started throwing out cover crop seeds just all over the place. If anything would grow, we were excited to have it grow and put some roots in the ground. Every now and then we would get some wood chip deliveries, and we would spread that in here as well. And with each passing season, it seemed like we had a little more life. We also had rabbits at the time, so I would spread some rabbit manure to try to get some, I thought at the time, nutrition from the manure, but now I'm thinking more it was microbes that really made the difference in that manure. And then what I think really changed things for me is one season I took chicken run dirt, because we finally had our chickens here. I took chicken run dirt, and because I didn't have enough dirt to really spread everywhere, I put a lot of it in a wheelbarrow, and I just kept adding water, and I would throw that water all over the place in the garden. There was nothing to eat in the garden. It was just a whole bunch of mulch and some cover crops, but I just drenched the garden in chicken run dirt water. And the next season, when I would dig into the ground, it was so much softer. Things started growing. I feel like that was a turning point in the garden. So what I did with the chicken run dirt was I took my wheelbarrow in there and I filled it about half full with anything that I could get off of the ground in the chicken run. And I brought it into the garden and I filled the wheelbarrow with water. And then I took a 5-gallon bucket, filled it up out of the wheelbarrow and just threw it. And then I added more water into the wheelbarrow. And I just kept doing this. And when most of my manure dirt had also been thrown out, then I would go get a little more dirt. And so basically, I think I was making a dilution or a compost tea, something like that. But the main thing was I was throwing microbes everywhere. I don't think I was really spreading nutrition so much as I was putting microbes all over the place, and they were going to help me digest this mulch that I had covered the garden with. Almost 2 years after disking and covering the dirt, spring of 2020 came around, and it was so exciting because I was growing food, and I was growing food galore. I had lettuce and okra and squash and beans, tomatoes. It was like a real garden, and all without anything commercially purchased or produced. We had loofah and snake gourd and pumpkins and sweet potatoes. So something happened after all of that chicken water. In fall of 2020, things were starting to die back, and yet I was still getting some okra and things like that. And that is when we made the video of the garden before. So if you go back and look at that video, you'll know kind of in time where we were in the process. After that video, I broad forked a lot of the area, and I think that helped me in some ways because it helped break apart some of the recompacted areas, but it also hurt me in a sense because some of my mulch layer that wasn't decomposed enough got mixed in. And I also bought some bagged compost, or it was supposedly compost, but I think it hadn't really broken down enough, and so I was really putting a lot of carbon into the soil, and that set me back. So spring of 2021 was not wonderful. But fall of 2021, this past fall, was the most magnificent garden I had had to date. I added frost protection for my fall and winter vegetables because we go from hot, hot, hot to freezing, and things that should be frost and freeze hardy don't get a chance to build up those sugars and become hardy. So this past fall, I finally added some frost protection, and we had kale and collards and broccoli and cabbage and rutabaga all fall and winter and spring. And a lot of it's gone to seed. Some of it's making a bit of a comeback now. So I've got a transition garden going at the moment of what's left over from the fall winter. And then I'm interplanting my newer spring and summer crops. So again, more and more life with every passing year. So now we're getting ready for the spring season, and I have tomatoes that are more amazing than anything I've ever grown. We have strawberries. I pulled up a huge, wonderful garlic harvest. I'm just seeing so much potential and so much promise, and I think I've figured a few things out along the way that I could have done better, that I would encourage other people to do. But even with everything I did and could have done better, I still have what I feel is a great result from not buying any insecticides or fertilizers. So one thing I've noticed along the way is anywhere that I've had perennials planted, the annuals are far more successful. So this whole area has had turmeric in it since we moved out to the property. So for almost 4 years, there's been turmeric growing here. And I let it overwinter. I dig it up when I want some, or if someone wants to take some to their garden. But in general, I just leave it here. And I decided this year that's too much turmeric and it's taking up valuable real estate. So I dug up the front of the bed and noticed that the soil was amazing. Not only was it soft, so I can easily stick my spade down there, and this was hard brick, so it's very soft. There were lots of earthworms in here, I think that the rhizomes had really fed the soil. So anywhere, I'm going to cover that back up, anywhere that I've had comfrey or asparagus or turmeric or galangal planted, they produced exudates, and then microbes live on that and bring in the earthworms, and then my annuals benefit from all of that. Anywhere that I could leave some perennials in the ground, I think it's to my benefit, and it will really help me with my annuals. So another big lesson that I've learned is the value of living walkways. I have no desire to just cover my walkways in wood chips ever again. That does mulch, that does feed the fungi in the soil, but I can do better than that. I can keep living roots in my walkways. They will break apart my dirt. They will create sugars and exudates that feed the biology. And all of that is going to help support what I'm growing in my growing beds. So I have purchased alfalfa pellets. So that would be something that I have purchased and used. And my hope is that I could replace the alfalfa pellets with comfrey in the future. But so far I have fed this garden alfalfa pellets, chicken run dirt, and I have a whole new situation in the chicken run now because we now own a trailer and we own a truck, and we are able to go get bags and bags and bags of leaves. So in the fall, I can go around, gather up leaves. The chickens then turn that into a large quantity of chicken dirt for me. They mulch it up, they add their fertilizer, and then when I plant my transplants, I put some chicken dirt down, or I just throw out some chicken water. But I have more chicken dirt than I've ever had before.
Sure.
So we used to have the chickens out all over the property, and they would free range, and I found that I couldn't plant along my deer fence because the chickens would come and eat my cucumbers and my squash and things like that. And also, once we planted an orchard and mulched the orchard, they were digging up all of my trees. So we've decided instead to keep them locked up. They have a large space, and I bring the green to them. And they work on my leaves for me and make my chicken run dirt. They get a lot of fresh green when I bring it in, and I'm able to keep my property from getting demulched, as they like to scratch up all the mulch. So we've got some nice, soft, rich dirt to add to our garden. Another thing that I feed the garden with is I have 2 buckets. I have a big barrel that's blue, and that's my sea bucket. And when my dad fishes, he reserves the fish guts for me. And so I just let them rot, and every time he brings me more fish guts, I throw them in, and that goes in the garden. And then I have a big green barrel that is my weed and comfrey and banana leaves, and anything green goes in that bucket, and it rots down, and I add that. I just dilute all these things down. When I have things growing in the garden that I'm going to actually eat the leaves or the fruit, then I will pour it on the ground toward the roots of the plant. But if it's between seasons, or I have an area where I'm not going to eat that food, it's not time to eat it anytime soon, then I will fertigate and I will inject those things into my sprinkler system and just spray it all over the place. So those are the ways that I have fed the garden, and it seems to be working very well so far. I feel like the mulching is great where you're growing the things you want to pick. Who wants to pick amongst a whole bunch of cover crop and it's hidden in there? Who wants that? So mulch where you're growing your produce, but let your walkways be living, pumping sugar into the ground, breaking up your soil. Mulch just can't compete with that. We could look back and analyze how I started this garden, and I can think of so many ways that would have been better. It would have been better to have added manure underneath the hay that I spread. Well, I didn't have manure. It would have been better to have planted a cover crop. Well, I wasn't living here and that wasn't feasible at the time. So I feel like you need to work with what you have, do what you can do, and as long as the soil is covered in some way, preferably with living material, and if that doesn't work for your situation, then just cover it with whatever you can. And if you have access to some manure that you feel comfortable with, add that as well. And it doesn't take much. You can spread it by diluting it with water. But I think we get so fixated on what the best solution is, and if we can't achieve that because it's not within our reach, we need to remember that there are still other things we can do that are better than other alternatives that other people may choose. So fertilizer is becoming much more expensive. There's a school of thought that thinks that the salt fertilizers really are not helping you in the soil department as far as all the microbiology. So I think that if we can learn to grow in a way that doesn't rely on fertilizer, then it doesn't matter how expensive fertilizer gets or how difficult it is to come by. We're free of that and have a different way of growing, and we're not dependent on it.